but a flimsy.
Hey, this is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek, and we have covered the struggle of railroad workers for health and safety, the fight against one-person crews, the continuing struggle to get days off for railway workers, and what happened with Congress voting to send the railway workers back to work without sick days. And now we have had a recent catastrophic railroad explosion in Ohio that threatens a community, and toxic gases are coming out. And I think it's important to go back and really learn the lessons of what's going on, because we cannot be safe with our railroads in the present state of staffing and the present management. And joining us is Gabe Christenson. He's with the Workers United co-chair, and I've had him on before, and we've talked about the issue of health and safety and for railroad workers and for the community, for the public. So welcome to Workweek, Gabe.
Thanks, Steve. It's good to see you again.
So Gabe, why don't we go over the most recent railway disaster, and what we know. It just happened a short time ago, yesterday, but already it's creating a real catastrophe for the people of Ohio. And fortunately, no railway workers were killed, but people being harmed by the toxins and everything else going on.
So this is a huge thing. I mean, people are going to be feeling repercussions from this health-wise, I imagine, for decades. I mean, this is horrible stuff that's going out into the air, and I feel for the citizens of Palestine and everything. And really, in my eyes, this is just another call for nationalization of the railroads, public ownership. You know, time and time again, we keep seeing these railroads petitioning the FRA for waivers to reduce safety protocol. You know, PSR eliminating mechanical inspectors and things like that who are responsible for making sure these cars should be on the rails or not. And right here's a direct effect of it. And I hate to say this, I don't really think this is an isolated incident. We've been seeing an increase in derailments since these trains have been getting longer and longer in the effort to cut crews. So it's not, I think this is something we're going to be seeing in the future. You know, it's a horrible thing to say, but until we can make a change, this is going to be common, I think.
And the situation with BNSF, I mean, I've interviewed railroad workers who've been retaliated against for making health and safety complaints. I mean, railroad workers are not only threatened by the lack of staffing, but when they do make complaints, they're retaliated against. It seems like a common operating procedure, and as a way of intimidating the workers. I mean, Warren Buffett, who's the multi-billionaire owner of BNSF, by the U.S. Congress's, the Democrats and Republicans ordering the railroad workers to go back to work without sick days, basically allowed the railroads to continue to understaff. Is that really what happened?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And what you're seeing too, it's not just crews on the trains that are having their numbers reduced. You're seeing carmen, you know, and that has to do directly with what happened in Palestine with the derailment. You know, one of the terminals that I used to work through, they had 5 carmen every shift, and they're the ones who, when a train shows up, they inspect the cars and make sure everything's working correctly on them. And now that same terminal has 2 carmen, and they're overwhelmed by these massive trains, because when they had 5 carmen, the trains were half the size. You know what I mean? So they had more people and half the cars to inspect on each train that came through. I'm really starting to try to ask like questions of what caused this. And I think a lot of it is recently, in the last year or two, we used to have an FRA regulation that NS is one of the railroads that petitioned for a waiver and was granted by the FRA to reduce the inspection time. So if a car wasn't on air connected to a locomotive, they would have to inspect that car if it'd been, we call it being off air, for 4 hours. Now they have a waiver where they don't have to inspect that car for 24 hours. So if it's in a yard being switched and things could happen to the car, if it's not off air for more than 24 hours, they don't inspect it. And there's the carmen. There's so few carmen now that when they do roll into a terminal, they're being pushed so hard by management to get these trains back on the rail and moving, that stuff could be missed. And it's time to stop this. It's time to stop this. There's every day, different railroads are trying to petition the FRA for waivers to reduce safety. And with how massive our rail network is in America, the FRA is there to regulate them and inspect them and make sure they're doing stuff safely. But there's so few FRA employees that they can't possibly be everywhere all the time. It blew me away 20 years ago when I started working for the railroad that there is no preventative maintenance done on any of their equipment. It's kind of, we'll fix it when it breaks. You know what I mean? Other than an inspection here and there. And you're talking thousands and thousands of miles. And these things, when they get to where they're going, they turn them right around. So they're not taking them into a shop, taking time to make sure everything's kosher and stuff. So and this is all an effort to increase their profits, right? Because if they're cutting crews to inspect the cars, they're cutting crews to run the trains, they're putting public safety at risk to increase their profits.
Deregulation, which the railroad owners have pushed, they don't want regulation or have the railroads regulate themselves. You have like Deusen, who's the governor of Republican governor of Ohio. They are against regulation. I mean, it seems like really insanity when you have whole neighborhoods threatened with destruction because of lack of regulation, lack of health and safety. The railroads apparently have captured the U.S. government agencies, which are supposed to do oversight. Both OSHA and these agencies were supposed to protect the operating system of the railroads. It sounds like it's getting worse and that this is something that you expect to happen on a regular basis.
Right. And I mean, this is what you get when you deregulate stuff or loosen up regulation. You can't expect these greedy multi-billion-dollar corporations to honestly police themselves because they have one thing in mind, and that's profits. And they've shown that. Look at the supply chain issues that we've had over just the last year. Every single Class 1 railroad, I think, reported record profits, right? With everything that's going on. And they use safety constraints as a reason for service interruptions. They're talking about in Nevada, there's a section of track that's CTC control, and it's probably the safest way to run trains. It's where you have a dispatcher that gives signals out in the field to the trains to operate on and things like that. And they want to go back to the way we ran trains in the early 1900s with track warrant control, just because they don't want to fix the issues that they're having on that stretch of track. And they're using the poor service to Foster Farms as an excuse because everybody knows it's been watching the news. They've been called up to in front of the STB twice now, I believe, to say, why is their service so bad? You know, it's not only public safety, it's people's money. You know, all these charges that they're creating for all these shippers that we have, they're not going to eat that money. The shippers are going to push it back onto the US consumers. So it's every facet that you look at, you know, they're just hammering you everywhere.
And the RWU has written some articles and come out with the view that really the only solution at this point is nationalization of the railroad. Why don't you talk about your vision, why you've come to that conclusion and your vision of how that would work?
I think that it gives everybody a voice at the table. If you look at the Plum Plan, that would incorporate people elected by union employees of the different railroads onto a board. There would be, the government would elect people to the board. Shippers would have a voice on the board. The railroad management would have voices on the board. But there's more checks and balances in this plan than there are what we're doing right now, where they just run away with with the piggy bank. There'd be more oversight for safety, I believe, because there would be public on the board that could, call the railroads on their safety and everything.
Well, nationalization, do you think you should have private ownership? And it seems like, first of all, Warren Buffett and the billionaires who own these railroads apparently control the Democrats and Republicans. That's why they voted for you and other railroad workers to go back to work without sick days. How are you going to get from where we are now to nationalization of the railways.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle, definitely, but it's something that for my community and my family and my brothers and sisters I work with, in the US, this is a fight worth fighting, you know. We're just starting to try to go public with, you know, the nationalization. If anybody wants to read about it, we have several things on railroadworkersunited.org, press releases and examples, because really we're one of the only nations in the world, you know, first world nations in the world that don't have some sort of a nationalized railroad. That's why, you know, if you look at the efficiency here compared to other countries, like in Europe and things like that, we're so behind the game right now. And it's because they have nationalization there. I firmly believe that.
Yeah, in Japan, you have bullet trains, China, Korea,
Right.
Europe. The transportation system is decrepit, and not only is it decrepit, it's a danger to the health and safety of the public, which is what this explosion is showing.
Right, right. And we barely have passenger service in this nation. You know, this is something that we should be like running towards with environmental concerns and everything that we have with vehicles and stuff. I don't know, we should be embracing it, but all these major corporations are kind of, it's like they're trying to break our passenger service in this country, you know, and it's an untapped resource, you know. Transportation is a huge thing that people limits the amount of money they can make because they may live in a rural area or they may be lower income. And if they did have rail service, they could, you know, it would give them a chance to expand their search for jobs or better jobs and things like that. You know, it opens up so much to so many people.
And the issue of political candidates, if the Democrats and Republicans are not going to bring about either health and safety on the railroads or nationalization of the railroads, what about labor having its own political candidates, working people having their own political candidates that will have a program for nationalization of the railways and for the protection of the public and the workers on the railroads?
Right. I think people are starting to realize that this two-party politics isn't working. You know, they don't have our, you know, our best interests in view in a lot of ways. You know, there are some people, but they're independents. They're classified as independents. You know, I firmly believe in a labor party.
Were railroad workers shocked about what happened with the Democrats uniting with the Republicans to force workers back to work without days off, sick days?
Yeah, I was blown away. Everyone I worked with, they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe it. You know, I mean, it was heartbreaking. I don't know. We're still feeling the effects of it. I have a brother that it was his wife's grandmother passed away. He called up to try to get a day off because she had literally found out like 2 hours before he was going to have to go out of town for work, and she wasn't in the state of mind and to leave. And we don't get bereavement for grandparents, so he asked them if he could take a paid day off, and they said no. And so he ended up having to lay off sick, get points on his record and things like that. That's for a death in the family, you know. Whereas if we had sick days, I mean, he could have possibly taken 2 days off to console his wife and be with his family and everything like that. Cause I mean, that's a big loss. So, but every day you hear different things. I mean, I'm at work. I know everybody's been getting sick this winter. The flu's been really bad, everything like that. And everybody's showing up to work sick because they're scared to get points and be fired.
So do you think that's one of the reasons there was a change in the leadership of the Teamsters unit, BMW? I mean, the rail workers are getting fed up and saying enough is enough. We got to have some changes.
I don't know. I think that they saw what happened with this agreement and they wanted, that's the thing, that a beautiful thing about being in a union, everyone gets a vote, right? And if you don't like the way the direction is going, or how the direction the union's going, or what they're fighting for and stuff, you have the ability to change that. So I do think that there was quite a few people that's why you saw a change up.
And the unions now in the railroads, do you think that they should take up a national campaign for health and safety, for nationalization? I mean, especially since this wreck in Ohio is an example of where this is going.
I really do. I really do. It benefits our safety as employees. It benefits the public safety. And ultimately, that's what my job and every railroader's job is. I mean, it's to transport freight, but it's also to do safely, right? We live in these communities that we run through. We don't want anything to happen to anyone, you know. Our job is to get this from point A to point A, or point A to point B safely. So
Okay.
I think that you know, the unions, I really hope they do get involved with this nationalization campaign that we're really trying to get started.
And it sounds like it's going to get much worse with this lack of health and safety, and the drive for profits is really destroying the whole railroad system.
Right. They don't care. I mean, if they run 30,000 trains and they have one derailment like in Palestine, and their eyes are ahead of the game, right? Because they cut all those crews, they doubled up trains, they have a third of the carmen that they used to have. I mean, to them, that's cost of doing business, right? And we should be able to do it better. I mean, I would hate to think that this happened because a car wasn't inspected. And if possibly the railroads hadn't got that waiver to change it from 4 hours to 24 hours, what if that would have prevented a catastrophe? But you keep hearing all this push for deregulation, and I'm here to say this is going to be not uncommon to have derailments like this. I mean, we've seen it since the increase in the lengths of trains and everything like that. There is a direct correlation between these massive trains and the derailments that we have, and the severity of the derailments. You know, they weren't made to go this long. I mean, 3 miles, 3.5 miles. I don't know. I heard some railroads, somebody said they heard that they were running 5-mile long trains in the Midwest. The only thing that makes them not do that out here is because we have mountains they got to get over. So,
and these waivers, who's giving them? What government agency is giving them?
The FRA. So the railroads will petition for a waiver on a certain safety rule or regulation. They'll put it up for a public comment period generally. You know, legislative reps, like what I am for my union, will put in comments opposing it. And I mean, that's how that happens.
And the head of this agency, who are they appointed by?
FRA. Right now it's Amit Bose. You know, so the president appoints the leadership.
Are there any labor people on these boards?
No.
Should there be?
Yes. Here's the thing, generally most FRA inspectors that I've met have been railroad employees. And this is what I said about having the government get involved in our contract negotiations. We have a different language. So unless you live this railroad life, you have no idea what's going on out here. You can try to get bits and pieces of it, but unless you're out here doing it, you can't fully understand it. People who are out here 2 years can't fully understand it. You know, it's a life you have to live for a while to really see everything. So that's why with the contract negotiations, you know, on paper, some stuff look good to people who are on the outside, but people in the industry, we know best, right? And that's why so many people were opposed with it. And the same with safety. You know, a lot of people might say, oh, well, what's the difference of 4 hours and 20 hours? You know, how much stuff can happen in that short of time? But a lot can. I mean, we see how this equipment's ran. They don't, you know, they just see it clickety clack down the tracks, you know. So yeah, I would really like to see more. I would like to see a union voice in regulatory decisions, like directly where they can say yay or no or nay, and then give their reasons why. I would hope to think that our comments for opposition on these things are really looked at, but I mean, they're still getting the waivers, right? So hopefully, I mean, if anything good could come out of Palestine, the derailment and everything, is that maybe they'll roll back some of these waivers that they have given out.
Well, I think it's going to take some public movement of
Right.
working people in the public and communities around this country. I think enough is enough. How many more explosions and dangers do we have to people in the railway system?
Right. And this is something that didn't need to happen. I mean, I don't know. Time will tell. The STB investigation, I mean, we may not hear for 2 years. I'm hearing bits and pieces, but I can't, it's all secondhand information. You know, it was an overheated journal, which is like the bearings on a car, which would make sense to me, because if they're bad, they get hot enough to where they're molten metal. But is that the cause? I don't know, because I'm not there. I didn't see it. Could it be train length? Broke in two and then something happened. I don't know. But like I said, I keep saying these longer trains and cutting employees that inspect the equipment that are rolling through our neighborhoods. You do that, you're going to have this happen.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much for joining us on Work Week. We've been talking with Gabe Christenson. He is a railroad worker, a legislative rep for his union, and also a co-chair of the Railway Workers United. So thanks for joining us, Gabe.
All right, thank you, Steve.